Welcome to the Week in Italian Startup, where we discuss the latest highlights happening in the Italian tech and investment ecosystem. Let's start and dive in with the Bending Spoon raising 70 million euro of debt facility from SACE and Intesa Sanpaolo. So again, we have our friends from Bending Spoon, definitely like one of the big names happening in the few months with the acquisition of Evernote and these new movements. That's a very interesting deal, I would say, for two elements. One is the fact that, as you mentioned, this is a debt facility, so it's not only equity, and maybe we can talk a little bit about venture debt in particular. And the second part is the reason that they mention why this fundraiser has happened, which essentially is to expand. So a very, very precise way to think about this round, and a very clear mission to actually make the company like more heavily relying on the international customers in general. What is your first take on this?
Well, we do have a national champion that's out for hunting actually, and this is the second time they raise money to go after the strategy. Last time it was 340 million, I believe. It was both equity and debt. This time it appears to be only debt, with Intesa Sanpaolo investing again, so the big bank, and SACE joining the round. SACE is sort of an agency financing Italian companies going abroad and supporting investments in internationalization, I believe. Please.
Yeah, maybe we are on maybe venture debt in Italy is on the rise because we have seen many deals. Maybe comparatively not as many as equity rounds for sure, but increasingly a lot of deals that are using some form of what we can call proto-venture debt. Maybe it's not venture debt as it's conceived in the Anglo-Saxon countries, but definitely the banks are looking into the space more and more. So for the listener, just to give like a 30-second overview, venture debt is essentially a way of that banks, especially like investment banks, use to finance a high-risk operation. Interest rates tend to be higher and the time frame tend to be shorter, just to compensate for the higher risk. This is like the 101 of venture debt. And then, of course, with a different like declination. Generally, venture debt is done to finance R&D and expansion. So that's really like a very targeted way of managing like specific loans. And Italy has seen a few occasions where banks intervene. They're like building something on those lines. I don't know if we can properly talk of a fully organized venture debt like dynamic, but definitely it's something going there. And I think there is something because SACE specialized in small and medium enterprise for financing like operations. Maybe that's going to be their next way to actually interact between growing startups and the future of like banking and financing. That's what do you think?
Well, that might be. I think I have to comment on what you're saying. I agree with you. And in particular, Intesa is doing quite a bit in this space. So providing debt facilities, big or small, to many startups. So they're basically taking risks in that market. Regarding SACE, that's not the first operation that they have made in the space that comes to mind. I believe there have been a couple in the past year. So again, we are at the early steps, as you say, in using debt by startups to fundraise and growth in some way. We'll see. I don't know whether we should talk about venture debt in the full way, and I agree with you, or we are at the beginning of some kind of venture debt wave, or this is just debt raised by companies that they happen to be startups and they're just financing their operations in a way that they have little alternatives. I don't think it's the case of bending spoons. I think the choice by bending spoons is deliberate. So debt is a better tool for them to acquire targets than equity. Equity is expensive as a way to as a way to raise cash to make acquisitions. But still, we'll see whether it grows or not.
Yeah, because venture debt in general has pros and cons, in a way, and then maybe one interesting con is actually when too much venture debt can actually harm the long-term growth of a company. So having a lot of debt facility definitely can impair the way companies can grow, both organically and even through other instruments, other debt instrument. So it's a delicate situation, I would say. That's my sensation. What is your take on this, Nick, in your experience?
No, I totally agree. If you're a startup, you probably are investing a lot in growth, and you've got a lot of expenses that are going to grow. If you need to cut down on expenses that are related to grow in order to service the debt, then you have a problem. That means that you need experience, you need to understand the debt, you need to have clear ideas about you need to service that debt. I think this is the case for bending spoons. It might not be the case for others, smaller startups using debt. And you see debt and say, hey, cash, I can get money on the table and use it to grow. But at the end of the day, EBIT is your anchor. Unless you're able to have a positive EBIT and to service the debt, you've got a problem, a real problem.
Interesting. Okay, moving forward, ViceVersa, revenue-based financing startup, raised 10 million euro in a round led by CDP Venture Capital. Very interesting. Again, we're talking about revenue, financing, and so on. So we're definitely on theme. So ViceVersa is doing something extremely interesting, which I thought it was particularly powerful. So essentially, they're financing they're financing the revenue of companies. So once companies show revenue, then they provide financing on those terms, and then basically companies can access liquidity very quickly, and that's very interesting.
Yeah, again, talking about financing, that in this case, ViceVersa is a way, or offers a way for startups, in particular, SaaS startups. So business models with recurring revenues are better candidates for this type of financing tools, I believe. Basically, the idea is that once you get ARR, then you can, expense that ARR in order to get money and to start to continue investing in the growth flywheel, and that's the play by ViceVersa. You look at the time financing as a percentage of revenues in terms of cost, not in terms of EBITDA. It's a model that's been around for a few years, not many. There are a few bigger startups out there in the world doing something similar. ViceVersa is probably the first one out of Italy. And this is a nice round, very interesting.
All right, moving on. Primo Space announcing an undisclosed investment in Lulav Space, an Israeli space tech startup. So that's interesting. I think is worth mentioning.
That's a lot of space. A lot of space in a single sentence, but
So just to say, the vertical is moving. Space economy is definitely not sleeping.
Yeah. In this case, Europe is quite strong in the space economy. It is an interesting investment from our space team into Lulav. Lulav is a very early stage startup. They raised money from Angular Ventures, a seed round, and then they closed this, let's say, second round. Still mostly undisclosed, but the team, we could have stopped the team to talk about the round because they were so excited about the startup, about the opportunity, about what they're doing, and so they had to tell the world about it. But it perfectly fits the thesis around Primo Space. So new technologies, automation, going to space, and supporting space missions.
Moving on, Clearbox AI, synthetic data startup raising 385K in a seed round. I thought that was particularly interesting also because the use of synthetic data is something that we've seen before, and for, of course, the rise of machine learning models, and they need data to basically train those models, so that's something we like and we've seen growing. All the privacy compliance that is really shaking a little bit the tech space, and the use of synthetic data can actually be like a viable solution to this problem. So companies working in the space definitely will see some movement in the future.
Well, tell me about some. Last week, the European Commission sent out a draft of early legislation around the training of large language models and AI in general, with like wording about finding companies that do not treat correctly, they're not transparent about the use of data to train language models. Like they hire between 20 million euros and 4% of revenues. It's like, anybody who wants to train a model needs to be fully transparent about the use of data and the data used in those models. So they basically created a huge market for companies that are able to generate synthetic data and try to decouple private information and the training of models. Then there's a problem there. So synthetic data is easy to build in things that have a statistical representation, hard data, numbers, quantitative information can be more easily synthesized in a sense. But still, I believe we will get to the point where you can do the same with text or unstructured data. Europe will come out with strong ideas about how you can and should train your model. So the early legislation made some noise, but it's very early. It's a very early draft.
Interesting. Okay, some closing notes. New crowdfunding platform for European startup. So again, the crowdfunding space in Italy is like moving, and this particular platform seems at least to be completely focused on deep tech. It's the collaboration of a pretty big company in Israel that is one of the 4 investors. So I think it was particularly nice combination there.
Yeah, I agree. There is interesting movement between Israel and Italy. So we have seen several companies and investments, crossing between the 2 countries. Neva from Intesa has been investing in Israel. YAG is collaborating with this investor in Israel, with Primo Space. And so the collaboration is going both ways. So it is interesting for us to build that bridge, because in a sense, Israel is a very mature market, and I believe it will have very positive impact and effects on the Italian ecosystem.
Awesome. All right, Nick, thank you so much. It was always a pleasure.
Thank you, Jack. Ciao, everybody. See you in a week.